Hello, everyone, and welcome to Aurora Founders Roundtable. Now, we have a bit of a treat for you today. We have the Aurora founders, the OGs, if you will, and they are going to pull the curtain a little bit back, and they're going to give us the inception of Aurora, some cool stories, and we're going to learn about how Aurora came to be. All right, Swami, well, let's start with you. So before Aurora, there was RDS.
Yeah.
Right? And RDS was and is still very popular. Our customers love it. Why did we want to build Aurora? What was the motivation?
There's a lot to that story. If I were to answer it, I'd say first it's because, I don't know, Grant and I were having a beer in Elysian on Friday at 4 p.m., but that's probably not the answer you're looking for. I would probably say it came down to, I mean, Aurora had a lot of actually initial founders, not just Grant and Jan or Raman who's here, but Raju and few of us got together and we were forming database strategy. One of the core things, I mean, we actually were building Dynamo because we actually wanted to build the unlimited scale, always actually on database that was DynamoDB. But then we asked our question saying like, hey, originally SQL databases were built for like running in a server with attached storage. What if you had to reimagine database and what would that look like? So this kind of unconstrained thinking led to saying like, we need to reinvent databases for the cloud, the SQL databases. And this led to what became Aurora. And that was the core reason because traditional RDS still was like, hey, you're going to run the engine like Postgres or MySQL on an EC2 with underlying storage, and you're going to run it the way it is. But Aurora was born out of this unconstrained thinking on the compute and the storage and the IO and the ability to do like on-demand snapshots. There are so many innovations we can unpack, but all of it was started with a very one simple question. If you were to reinvent databases for the cloud, what would that be? And that led to Aurora.
Yeah. And like we said at reInvent, right? Aurora, the new dawn, right? And it was pretty innovative at the time, still is, but we basically built this compute and storage and the distributed storage. But I think there was a specifically big bet we made, which was the compatibility with open source, right? We could have just made our own database engine. We didn't. What was the motivation for that, Grant?
So, I mean, originally, we, as Swami said, we really had kind of an open book when we looked at this because we were just like, what can we do, right? And so originally, actually, we're looking at building things, a lot of different things. And really what you see as Aurora today was kind of probably about the third iteration, right, on that. But part of that, cycling of going through that was really thinking about how do we serve customers best. And even though with Dynamo, where we've, kind of pioneered something very specific that had a different interface, but it was for a different purpose. But for a relational database, we wanted something that customers could really adopt and use. And what we saw was that if we went and used open source and made it open source compatible, then we're going to have something that was going to have much more leverage for the customers, much easier to pick up, easier to use and integrate. Because one of the big things is you can make the next generation database, but if customers have trouble adopting it, it doesn't really do anyone any good. And so I also felt that like the open source community had a lot to offer because you're basically partnering with, a group of people who are trying to innovate as well. And so you get that combined effort of both us innovating kind of from a cloud perspective with these groups innovating on the actual engine software. So that combination really allows you to have a much better, service for the customers in the end.
Yeah, makes sense. And we're gonna have a little bit of fun. We wanna pull that curtain back a little bit. Want to know about what happened back in the day. So we have lots of code names, is what I understand. And we have heard about that, like Grover, and there's Manfred and Oscar. And I hear that there's a little children's show that has had a lot of influence on that. What's the story there?
Yeah, so actually in the early days of AWS, RDS, actually the code name for RDS was actually relational database service because we didn't actually have a code name back then. But some of the other services actually had chosen
Well, hello there. What do we have here? Who is this?
This is again another
Kermit the Frog.
yeah, which is one of the code names for one of the services or one of the features that we've built. But both Dynamo and Elasticache had both chosen Sesame Street characters as code names. And we had, at the same time, picked Oscar as our one for Aurora. And that was because it was partly my pitch along with Swami and folks. And I was a bit grouchy back then, as Swami could probably attest. So Oscar the Grouch kind of fit with that. And then when we got the storage going, I was like, we were sitting there saying, well, we really need a code name for the storage. And I said, well, Grover is Oscar's best friend. So obviously it needs to be Grover, right? And that kind of continued for a while. We've off and on used different names. Manfred is another one where we had to kind of go further because the Postgres community had used every elephant themed name thing gone. So we had to go
Animals, as they're called.
Yeah, exactly. So
I've heard people say, do you know your animal? Like, what does that mean? Of course, they're talking about Postgres.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know. We stopped actually. At that time, I didn't even have kids, so I didn't know the Sesame Street character, and I grew up in India. So I was like, why are they so obsessed with all these things? So I had to really go see a couple of Sesame Street shows to even understand all this etymology, because Dynamo was called Big Bird, Elasticache was called, I think, Elmo, and Oscar, Grover, and then it kept going. At some point, I said, the point of code names is to keep certain projects secretive. If everybody actually thinks one more Sesame Street character, then they will know, okay, it's a database team actually building one more thing. So we stopped naming any code name to be Sesame Street based. But it was actually a fun time.
Yeah. Yeah, and it leads to fun things like, one of your colleagues dressing up in a in a nice outfit to deliver a wonderful cake, right?
Yeah. Well, so, at AWS, we take pride into this builder culture, right? We are all innovators. What are some of these early innovations that we did, and what have you taken with you from those early innovations? Raman, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. I think one of the most important learning through my journey in Aurora, in general, AWS, has been like customer first mindset. I think that is really, really important, especially in a field like database services. Database are one of the more complex software systems that has been built, and it becomes easy to get caught away with technological innovation. So I want to build this cool thing. It will give me this output, and what really matters is that output helping a customer solve its pain point? If not, that's probably not the best investment. So it's really important to also take risk, but failing fast and making sure you are getting to the customers. And I think the other learning I would say is really thinking about scale. I think a lot of the things we could have done better was like if we were putting really this scale, which I think nobody really imagined at that point in time, really putting that in perspective and designing for that would have help us even move more fast in the whole journey. So I think that was just overwhelming overall.
And that's the funny thing is that we did actually plan for scale, right? But I don't think we planned for the scale that ended up happening, right? Like that's the amazing thing is you think, well, it's databases. How many databases could people want? And as it turns out, a lot.
Yeah. And how the scale changes the whole equation. Like it just changes how you build software, how you deploy software, how your communication, information flow in this organization. How do you think about scalable process? It just changes for Aurora every year now. We have to keep up, otherwise we are just left behind the curve. It's really important.
And the one thing to remember is some of this will sound obvious right now in retrospect, but this was like early days of cloud, probably 5 years into AWS or maybe something like that. And the scaling patterns of cloud and adoption patterns of cloud was exploding, kind of like where the AI era is right now. And so we were literally inventing what is going to be the net new way of building systems and software at every layer of the stack. And Aurora was one such amazing example there. And it's fascinating to see that trajectory hasn't changed because of this kind of growth.
Yeah, I think Aurora was probably one of the services which were built completely in the cloud on foundational AWS services like EC2 and S3 and some usage of EBS. And we had to build a bunch of systems, even to deploy our software in this complex stack, we had to build our own deployment story. We had to build our operational console story, a lot of dependencies or softwares which were not existent. 10 years back in AWS. We had
Yeah, and I'm sure you have a lot of those stories. Like you were just a young engineer when this started, and now you're managing an engineering team. So any cool stories there?
Well, I think I would say those are cool at that point in time, not so cool now. Even like talking about these thing, like whenever we build some like let's say a bespoke solution which was needed at that point in time, we are not really in that business. We are a database service. And it's just we cannot keep up with the industry or with the other innovations which are happening in that domain. Like even if we talk about deployments, right? We built our own. Now we have to keep up with all the advancements which are actually happening in, like, let's say, builder tools, which are being leveraged by all other teams at Amazon. And that's where I go back to the customer obsession part. It's always cool to build new stuff, but it's really important to think ahead and think long term before we just take the cool factor into practice.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Jan, as we innovate, there are a lot of successes, but innovation is not without failures, right? How about some stories about what we were trying to build something, it didn't work out, there were some failures, and what did we learn from that? How did we adopt?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, can't really ever say that we only succeed. Early on, we heard from our customers that they want fully scalable solution that would offer multi-writer. And we built this from them. We built it first on MySQL 5.7, retaining full compatibility with it. What we have learned that we just can't carry on with that. Solution was too complex, and it actually didn't satisfy our customers enough. That was the reason we decided to build DSQL. We decided that some of the requirements require compromises, require trade-offs, and we decided to build truly multi-writer capability within region or cross regions, but take back on our fully open source compatible requirements.
Right, and now DSQL not only does in-region, but also cross-region
Correct.
multi-writer.
Yes, that's where we decided to innovate. We decided to take this innovative log-first approach that would let us not just deliver multi-region solution, but deliver performant multi-region solution. That's at the end of the day what the main factor that makes database successful, performant.
But I would say, like, one of the interesting things is that, with these trade-offs, because there are trade-offs with all these technologies, is we like to offer, like, that was one of the very first things when we started RDS and then into Aurora, was really about giving customers, options for these trade-offs, because different engines provide different capabilities, whether it's MySQL or Postgres or DSQL. And, these trade-offs of, let's say, Aurora, Postgres, global database, if you want something that has low latency writes, then that's a great solution for you. If you need something where you have synchronous writes across region, we have DSQL. So, it does add a little bit of complexity to the choices, but in the end, if you're a business and you need some specific, capabilities with very particular trade-offs, we try to make sure we're doing that. So it's not like we've picked one thing and said, well, that's going to solve all the problems, because we've learned over time, again, with the multi-writer example, that there are these trade-offs, but it also means that you can't just have one solution to go with.
And also meeting customers where they are. I mean, we shipped Aurora MySQL first, and then we discovered customers really want Postgres, and we delivered Postgres as well. And doesn't mean we abandoned MySQL because of that. No, we continue to move full front on both engines. The same with DSQL. Adding a third engine doesn't mean we're going to pay less attention to the first two. We know that we want to deliver on all three.
Absolutely. And Aurora started as a single engine. It's now a portfolio of services, right? So yes, there are trade-offs, but there are different trade-offs for different workloads, which is why customers love it still. So it kind of brings us to this sort of like conclusion, right? Like we are now celebrating the 10-year anniversary, but we're not done innovating, not nearly done innovating, right? So this is for all of you, right? Like how do you see the future? What sort of innovation is coming? Of course, we may not be able to talk about individual features here, but what's that vision like?
Maybe I will start.
Yeah.
I will start. So why Aurora is successful? I think our attention to fundamentals, it's probably number one factor. So a lot of our innovation is coming not on the feature side. They are coming for making service more and more available in the face of failures, more and more available even for region unavailability. So a lot of innovation are not necessarily seen by customers, but make their application perform better, make more and more application be possible on Aurora. Let's talk about agentic applications. We now seeing explosion of multiple application, explosion of instance of application. We should expect 3, maybe 4 order of magnitude more instances. How do we handle that? That's the big question we are working on.
So that's like sort of manageability. I mean, when we started with something like RDS, it was very common for, a person to have to manage every piece of their database, right? And we've, slowly made that easier and easier. But so the number of databases has actually grown a lot in most companies. Like I remember when we made these things easier inside of Amazon, we saw like almost an order of magnitude growth in the number of databases. But now what we're seeing is, like, as Jan was saying, it's going, just ballistic. And to do that, that means customers, when you used to have one DBA manage one database, now someone might be managing 100. Now they're going to need to manage 10,000 or 1,000,000 databases, right? So that can't be done with just the, standard ways of managing. So we need to change the model of how we do manageability. And that means everything has to get simpler, easier, faster.
Yeah, I agree. I'm happy to go in the end if you want to add.
Yeah, I mean, I think what to Jan's point, like fundamentals for a database service will probably never change, right? You need more performance. You need it to be available all the time. You need it to be cheaper. And I think like when we are when we are having this data at scale, it's very different than when you're just starting. Like you don't have much data to make decisions, optimize your stuff. But when you are at that scale, this is a gold mine of actual data, which allows you to tune this whole thing, making it more like the better customer experience, whether it's cheaper, whether it's more performance, right? This is just like standard, like how do we innovate at scale outside, like more, you can say more features and stuff. This is just on fundamentals. I think that's what customers need really to work with databases all the time.
I love what everything that they said. I'll typically, when I get asked question about like in future what's going to change, I always answer it in 2 ways. The first one is like it's super important to recognize what's not going to change, and then you should talk about what's going to change. And what's not going to change is very similar to what Raman and Grant and Jan said. People are always wanting to have the best-in-class security, best-in-class durability, best-in-class availability, best-in-class performance. These are like the bread and butter. I would almost call it like air, water, and food, and that priority. I don't know what is more than food. After that, beer. But that actually is always going to be like the core thing you'll hit. But what's changing in the world right now is we as the entire world, like cloud changed IT. And it changed databases fundamentally, led to technologies like Aurora, where the role of a DBA changed in a big way, as Grant called out. But now in the future, especially in an agentic AI world, where agents are actually not just creating databases, but they are actually querying databases, and then they are moving data to analyze, and then they are making a bunch of these decisions and so forth. Who interacts with database no longer need not be a human developer writing static code. These agents are now generating code literally on the fly based on a question a human or other agents might ask. So you're already starting to. So what does this all mean for something like Aurora? And I won't give away any of the major launches they have because I'm not even in their day-to-day meetings. So otherwise I will be hallucinating, and it's not a good thing, like an LLM does. But actually, if you look in the recent past, and it's a pretty good indicator, Aurora was, this is when I was managing Aurora, they launched PG Vector, and it was one of the most performant PG Vector in the industry as part of Aurora. And that enabled a whole new slew of like RAG-based apps where if your RAG vector is co-resident with your relational data, suddenly the joint hybrid querying, all these things become remarkably easy. That was like it did it instantly. The next thing, I mean, now you're seeing is more and more, you saw already entire AWS is embracing like MCP with our MCP knowledge server and various others so that agents can enable, and Aurora will think through more and more across these things directionally. So it also, and let alone what does it mean in a new agentic world where you not only create tens of thousands of databases dynamically, but how do you manage it is a very interesting question, because we as humans then need to really start changing our mental radius on actually how do you think about like managing, going from what used to be 1 DBA managing like 1 to 2 big giant databases to now they are like probably 10 to 20 to now agents managing tens of thousands of databases. How do you you're going to get into a whole different slew of game. And in case anyone is noting down, I'm not revealing any roadmap because I'm not even involved in those things, but this is how directionally, I mean, these are the things where the industry is going. And you can imagine Aurora being the center of everything. We want to enable all these amazing capabilities as well.
Thank you so much for your time. I hope everybody learned something, and well, thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.